Thank you. So for the last 20 years, I've been consulting in one way or another for businesses, from large businesses to very small businesses. Businesses as small as just one person, and probably a lot of just one person interested in getting something going. They all have one thing in common. They all want to know, as you would expect, how can I get my business to grow? How can I move from where I'm at, deal with the problems? Sometimes it's a discovery of what the problems are. So how can I move from where I'm at and to be something better, to go to the next level or get over this problem? And over this period of time, I began to notice some patterns. Sometimes it's just they need some information and the information really helps. But one thing in particular I wanted to focus on, and that was there seems to be personality characteristics or some qualities of personalities that can both make a business successful, but it could also be the seeds of almost certain failure, or if not failure, then real challenges that don't need to be there. And getting and dealing with these personality characteristics can be really hard to recognize and really hard to deal with, and quite unfortunate. So I'll tell some stories as I go along, but that's the premise, and that's kind of the foundation for what I want to deal with. I'll tell one story to start with. So I'm dealing with a small manufacturer. They want to improve the quality and improve their processes in their manufacturing. And so as I'm talking with the manager, it becomes obvious to me that his pay systems are wrong. They just don't make any sense. Pay systems are wrong, and he has several employees that should be there that should not be there. And it took me about 6 months, maybe even more, during the consulting process to convince him that his pay systems have got to change. Their pay systems were actually reinforcing bad quality, and that he had employees there that just didn't care about working there and didn't care about quality, and they didn't fit. So that was a personality quirk that he cared enough about people, he was concerned about letting people go, he wanted to pay them generously, but actually that led to some real inherent problems. So after those months had passed, then he decided to make changes in the pay systems, decided what people needed to let go, how to let them go. And once he made those fundamental changes that were core to keeping him from going forward, his business just jumped up. And he has stayed productive for years and years after that. It's been several years ago. And it's been very, very effective. But interestingly enough, it was not a lack of education on his part. It was not a lack of experience, because he had plenty of business experience. He had owned his own business for a long time. Okay, it was just an attitude that he felt. I've also noticed this attitude when I go cold calling. One of the categories I like to cold call to are dentists. Dentists are great clients for me. So I'm in this one office complex, and I sell to this dentist. And this dentist buys, and he's really successful. So our advertising campaign for him, he jumped up. Matter of fact, the first day his office opened, he had 8 new patients just from our advertising. And it's continued on for year after year after year. Been very successful for him. And so my thought, maybe I'm a little slow, but my thought was, okay, if this dentist is so successful in this area, then across the street, or not even across the street, across the parking lot, there are other dentists that are not direct competitors, because the types of dentistry they practice are a little different. But perhaps they should also be anxious to buy my services, because I can make them as successful as this dentist across the parking lot. And so I go across the street and, if you will, knock on the door and say, hey, so-and-so has had this success. You know, it's been over time. I think you ought to try this. We need to talk because you could be successful too. Interestingly enough, no, I don't even want to talk, okay? I'm sure that won't be successful for me, and so I don't even want to talk about it. Okay, So not only is there one dentist in this complex, but there are several dentists that I could, if you will, ethically sell to because they have complementing practices. So I go to another, to another, to another. No, I'm not even interested in setting an appointment. Well, that caused me to think, so what's going on here? There's something going on. Why is the attitude, before we even have a discussion, the attitude is no, okay? And I've come up with several personality things I think I've found that, if you will, can be the seeds of, I don't want to say the seeds of failure, but maybe the seeds of lost opportunity, or maybe the seeds of making business much harder than it needs to be. And I'd like to talk about a couple of them. The two that I want to talk about are the setting of standards, and the other one is dealing with fear, and how fear shows up in our day-to-day business decisions. Now, I have my own font, and Isaac, I think, has much better penmanship than I do, so I'll do some interpreting as we go along here. I have found consistently in working with small businesses, they'll call me in and they say, hey, the business is struggling. I need to move the business up. I need to pull people in. I need more customers. Whatever it is, we've got to move this forward. And as I'm sitting there in the business, I get the impression is I really can't help this person. Okay, there's not much I can do. So an easy illustration is a restaurant. I go in the restaurant. The restaurant doesn't look appealing. It's not somewhere where I want to sit down and eat. Okay, the location is decent. When you actually taste the food tastes okay. Okay, and matter of fact, the food may even taste good. And it's not necessarily dirty even. I mean, there's not junk on the floor. I mean, it looks relatively clean, but it's just not put together. The whole experience is just not right. And you can tell maybe there's not a lot of effort put into it, okay? Things just aren't up to standard, okay? So the audience he's appealing to or trying to appeal to doesn't match what he's providing. And this is, I would say, actually quite common. And so even if I were to go out and promote for him, I can overcome a bad location. If it's a bad location, I can actually bring people into a really obscure locations, and I've done that, and bring people in. It's not location, and it's not necessarily the product per se, but it's low standards. And this is what happened. I put my marker away. I shouldn't have put my marker away. What tends to happen is on a quality versus price dimensions, they want to be somewhere in the middle. And that's their design. They want quality, and they intend to match it with price, and that's how they intend to do business. That's their intended target market. But the problem is their quality either drops, which tends to be the case, or it starts out real low. So if your quality is down here, this is where you actually are, then in order to have a match between quality and price, right? That's what people pay for, is a certain amount of benefits or quality. Then what it does is it forces their price to come down. So if their quality isn't good enough, if they're not matching their target market's quality, then they're forced to compete on price. And so they have to bring their prices down, and pretty soon they have very thin margins. They're having to really fight. The owner has to work a lot of hours because he can't afford as much staff, and so on, and things get really tight. It's really uncomfortable. And this is typically when they call me in and say, can you fix this problem? And the answer is, I really can't. At least I can't fix it with promotion or with the tools I have. There's fundamental changes that have to take place. So the problem, that's the nature of the problem. I want to talk about solutions, or what I would do to fix the problem. And by saying what I would do to fix the problem is also going to be my recommendations to you. So I'm not saying your standards are low, but what I am saying is let's make sure what the standard is, okay? So you know who you're competing against and how to compete. If it were me, I would look at the top 3 alternatives to coming to my business. So let's say I have a barbecue restaurant, okay? Who are my top 3 competitors? Meaning, if someone doesn't come and eat with me, what are the likely other top 3 choices? Where would they go to eat? Okay? So I want to be in that mix. I may not be the number 1 of that choice, but I need to know who the top 3 alternatives are. There are lots of places to go and eat, but more than likely, if someone is choosing me, who are the other 3 choices they might make? And then I would want to know what attracts them, what is attracting them to those businesses. Why are they going to my competitors? What is it about my competitors that's so attractive? And I need to be a student, if you will, of my competitors. I think it's as important for us to know about our competitors, what their strengths are as well as their weaknesses, but really know what makes them attractive. What are their weaknesses? And I need to know about my competitors as well as my target audience. I need to know them as well as a physician understands the body, okay? Or a heart surgeon understands the heart. So I need good information. I need to know what is attracting those customers. Why do they go there? And then I need to have the courage to change. I need to have the courage to get there. And I think it is more of a courage issue than other issues. Excuses are easy to come by. And yes, there's lots of reasons. We're going to talk a little bit about self-pity over there. Self-pity applies here too. A lot of excuses, why I can't get there. Maybe some of them are going to take me some time to get from here to there. But basically, I have a choice. I have a choice. I can deal with it, raise my standards, or I can sink down into this corner. The further into that corner I go, the more miserable it is to be in business generally, if I have to lower my price and my margins. So I have to step up. I recently rewatched the video, and I'm going to mispronounce this man's first name. If anybody speaks Japanese, you could help me out a lot. Hiro? How would you pronounce it? Hito? So Hito dreams of sushi, okay? If you haven't seen this little movie / documentary, it's about this Japanese sushi chef. And for years and years, when the movie takes place, the man is 85 years old. But his life is the love of sushi and improving the taste and quality of sushi. So improving his little restaurant. He only has 10 chairs in his whole restaurant. You have to get a reservation a month in advance, and the starting price is, if I understand the equivalent yen and so on, it's about 300 yen to have a seat and eat it, and that's where the prices start, with a month's advance reservations. And he makes a couple of good comments that I think apply here, apply to all of us. And it needs to be a characteristic I think we have to have in order to be successful. One of them is, he said, you have to taste excellence. You have to regularly be tasting excellence. So he goes and tastes the food from other chefs, the best chefs, and he's in Tokyo, the best chefs he can find. So he knows what excellence tastes like. He knows what good is. And I think that's a challenge for all of us that want to be entrepreneurs, be in business, whatever it is we want to accomplish. Do we know what excellence is? If we don't, then the risk is we'll miss that target. And we won't, our standards won't match those of our target market. I don't know how we naturally know. Maybe there's some people that do. I clearly have worked with business owners that, boy, when they open up the door, it seems like they just have it nailed. And some brand new restaurants I've worked with, I've asked them, is this a franchise or is this the first location? Because they've done such a good job setting everything up. And they said, no, this is a concept. We've never done this before. It's been my dream to open this up. But somehow they've gotten all the pieces together and they just seem to have nailed it from the very beginning as far as matching quality and hitting that high expectation. And so the one point I would hear is to taste the excellence, to know what excellence is, and then to match that quality to your target market, and then to have the courage to deliver it, to have the courage to deliver it. The other quality that actually comes in here that also shows up over here, so it matches, the other quality is to be playful. And when you're really, really stressed, it seems like playful may not be all that helpful. But in a great book called Play by Dr. Stuart Brown, he's a medical doctor as well as he does clinical psychological research for 30 years on the subject of play. Okay, there's someone that wisely chose what they want to study for the rest of his life. So he studied play for the rest of his life. And as a physician, he says, you need to be as sensitive to being tight and too serious as a heart patient would be to climbing steps and running out of breath, or to someone who's out of shape and getting signals that maybe my heart, I'm not in as good a condition as it would be. So in other words, it's critical to keep a sense of playfulness and to love what you do. There's a direct tie between being playful and loving what you do and being creative. So if you want to be creative in an ongoing basis, it's important to keep a sense of playfulness and to love what you're doing. And that seems to make pretty good sense. Let's move to another category. This is another really unfortunate category, meaning if people have this quality, meaning if they struggle with fear or issues of fear and aren't able to deal with it in a healthy way, it could have some really bad consequences. Perhaps I would say maybe even more serious than these consequences. And when I talk about fear, we all have fear. Part of fear just comes because I'm not sure of something, I haven't tried it before. Sales is a good example. When you first start selling, it can be really nerve-wracking, but you get used to it, you get over the initial, you know what you're talking about, and a lot of those fears subside. But sometimes fear doesn't subside. No matter how hard you practice at it, no matter how much you know, the fear doesn't go away. That's the kind of fear we need to be really careful of. I mean, other fears are serious as well, because when we have the problem of fear, what does fear do? It blocks us, right? It keeps us from going forward. I don't have any doubt that all of you have wonderful ideas, and there could be tremendous success coming from all of you. There's no reason to suggest that it wouldn't be. However, fear could be the one element in personality that keeps us from going forward with an idea. And let's talk about how some of that shows up. So, I'm one time consulting with this small, I don't know how you describe it. It was a small grocery store, gas station. I mean, there was a variety of things. They were in a little complex. And the business was going along fine. There were a few business owners. This story takes place with a managing partner. And so I talked to the managing partner and said, how are things going? She said, well, they're going fine, but I don't know how they're going because we don't get any financial information. And I said, what? The managing partner, so you're the one on site managing the business, not a small business, and you have no financial data. She says, no. The owner, the investor, owner, won't give us any financial information. All of it's handled off-site. And so we questioned around a little bit. Turns out the person that's financing the business also doesn't have any financial information. So they're making enough money that the boat's, not hitting the bottom, but they're really nervous at the same time because they don't know where they're at. And so I said, well, let's find out where you're at. And so I have somebody I refer people to for financial analysis work. He's an ex-CFO, and that's what he does is consult with businesses that have this type of problem. They did open up their books. He went through their books, and the analysis was, You know, you're okay. You're actually okay, but there are few things we need to adjust. Well, you can probably know where this story is going. Time went on. They continued. They told him, no, we don't want your ongoing businesses. We also don't want access to our financial information. They wouldn't look at their books. As time went on, obviously that was a huge seed for a problem. When we got down into it, the issue really was is that the investor and managers were afraid to fail. They were so afraid to fail, they wouldn't look at their own books. They would not look at their books. Okay? Now that sounds really strange. And do I exaggerate the story to make the point? The answer is, well, I didn't exaggerate the story, but I told a story that's, you know what I mean. The story is true, but yes, I'm picking a point to make the point. And so the business continued to decline. Now checks started getting bounced. Now they start having serious problems. But fear of failure was the underlying cause. What is fear of failure? Fear of failure is, I'm so afraid that I'm not somebody, that I'm not actually a good business owner, that I'm not a good entrepreneur, that I'm so afraid that that's true, that there's some things I can't face. And because if I face them, and if I fail, then that means that I am not of value. That means I'm not who I want to be. Okay? And that is actually a very common problem. Okay? So we're so afraid of failing that we completely block out some issues or don't deal with them or actually sabotage our own efforts. So we'll actually make sure we fail, and then we have, for a good reason, we make sure we fail for a good reason because we can't face that maybe I am a failure, okay, which is not true. Okay. So they will do all kinds of things to avoid failure. One of the symptoms or signs is self-pity. Feeling sorry for myself, making excuses. Okay, there are things that come up. There are serious challenges. And in fact, we may have a lousy idea. It may be a dumb idea. Sean, a quick test on time.
10 to the hour.
Is when we all need to be all done. Okay. So it may be that I have a really bad idea. So I'm having lunch one time with a man, and he also had been a CFO, and he spent a couple of years developing a product. When I sat down to lunch with him, he said, you know, I have plenty of money, I'm a CFO, I know how to run a business. He told me his business idea, and I thought, that makes no sense at all. Who would want to buy that? Okay? And then to further try and convince me of how prepared he was to go into business, why he wanted to convince me, I don't know. But to convince me of how prepared he wants to go into business, he says, I have spent the last 3 months working on the colors of my logo. And that was another tip off that maybe we have a problem here. He said, I've gone back and forth with designer, back and forth, and month after month we've worked on the color of the logo, and I got the shades of the color of my logo exactly right. And the thought went through my head, exactly right for whom? Who cares? You know, it may be important to have colors right, and colors definitely have an impact, but not like that, okay? And there's several other things that this made no sense at all. And so we went through, and that was one of those cases where I basically had to say, be very polite, but basically say, you know, there's really nothing I can do for you, and I don't really think, you know, good luck to you, and you go your way, I go mine. Okay, there was really, really nothing there. So we can get very distracted. We can come up with excuses and so on and so on. So there may be some reasons why we're going to fail, such as a bad product, missed focus, and so on. But these issues, self-pity and so on, one of the things they always lead to, if this is the problem, is we always want to quit. We're always looking for a way to quit. We're looking for that door to escape, save face, tell our family and friends whatever, hey, I gave it a great shot, but it didn't work out. Okay? And that's a problem. So, other things that contribute here that I think you would know naturally is avoidance activities, looking for something else to do that burns lots of energy, burns lots of time, but does not necessarily solve the problem. Okay, does not take us where we want to go. The other way you know that maybe you're dealing with issues of fear is by your physical reaction. Okay, and I think most of you know what that is. So shortness of breath, hard to think, heart races, literally acting as though you're panicked or you're in a stress situation. Those can be signs that what we're actually dealing with is fear and not something else. Okay. So self-confession. So in sales, sometimes I go door to door selling, meaning business to business selling. And occasionally I'll come along this business that should be really good for me. It would be a good sale. There's nothing wrong with it. Okay? But as I approach the business, I just get this feeling. I don't think this is good. Something's wrong here. Okay? And so somehow I'm mysteriously sensing from 20 feet away before even going through the doors that the owner won't like me, the owner won't like my product, the owner is too busy, whatever. And so I tell myself, this is not a good time. I better go on to the next place. Okay? Now, what I've learned over time is, at first I thought, I'm getting some kind of, this is some kind of, I don't know how it comes, but there's some sort of, I don't want to use the word inspiration because that's not what I think, but anyway, some sort of vibe, and I'm actually feeling it through the doors. I don't know what. But what I've come to find out is that's not true. Because every time I have that kind of feeling, I can also feel inside, and I sense inside what I'm really feeling is fear. And it's the fear talking. And the fear is giving me information that's just not accurate. And interestingly enough, once I started making those connections, I said, well, there's no reality here. So I'd walk through the door, and actually it can turn out to be a really positive experience. Believe it or not, that sign on the door that says no soliciting, I don't know what that means, but it doesn't mean don't come in here and try and sell me something. Because it seems oftentimes to say exactly that. So I'll walk through the door, try and sell something, and they'll thank me profusely for coming through the door. So it's not necessarily, so we have to watch the fear talking. Let's talk about solutions for this particular problem. And there are some good ones. Once again, an attitude of playfulness is not take ourselves so seriously, not to put the balance of my future on this has to work, okay, as I've got to make this happen, not to take something so seriously. And as a matter of fact, backing off and being a little playful can be key. Playfulness can lead, like I mentioned before, to creativity, to coming up with new ideas, and to relaxing. Number 2 is a healthy attitude towards failure. We all need, especially you, probably more, I don't want to exaggerate too much again, probably this group more than most other people here at the university needs to have a healthy attitude towards failure. It has to be okay to fail. I'm not saying fail permanently, but it has to be okay to make mistakes, to learn from the mistakes, and to go forward. Matter of fact, it has to be okay sometimes even to really make some big mistakes. Maybe we open a location and the location turns out to be a bad location. It's going to cost us a lot of money. It was a bad idea. We made the best decision we could, but it's a mistake. We're going to learn from it. We're going to move on. We don't cherish mistakes, but if we don't have the courage to fail, then how can we make any decision that moves us forward? If every decision has to be a winning decision, if it has to be right on the mark, if the color of the logo has to be dead on, can we really ever move forward? No, you can't. So it has to be okay to fail. It has to be okay to learn from our mistakes and move forward. If it's too tight, if we feel like we don't have the option to do that, then we're probably dealing with the fear of failure. Okay? The next one and is most interesting, and I would definitely say some of you in this group are dealing with this because it's very common, and that is to associate our worth with our achievement. You have to separate your worth as a person, which there's nothing you can do to change, by the way. You have to associate your worth as a person from your achievements. If you get tied up into thinking, I'll show people, or I'll have a sense of value, or I'll have a sense of worth if I achieve something, if I'm successful, you'll find that it won't work. And the research I've done over and over and over again with the books I've, if you will, trying to learn more about this subject because it applies so much to sales and to the people I work with, there is no relationship between your success at any level and your sense of self-worth. Okay? So if what we try and do is protect self-worth or raise our self-worth by achieving something, it can't be done. And as a matter of fact, it can actually add to the problem. So let's say we are driven by trying to feel like we have a sense of value. I want to accomplish something. I want to feel better about myself. I don't feel good about myself or my self-worth. I want to raise my self-worth, and I do that by trying to achieve things, and so it does push me, and I do succeed. Interestingly enough, you can't get there. You can't get high enough. And so what tends to happen is I want to work harder more here. I'll start some other venture and work hard to make it successful. I may make it successful. And so I'll start something else. But you can never get there, okay, through achievement. And that's a problem because that contributes, one is your overall happiness. If your overall happiness is out of balance, then how can we be successful in all the ways in our life? It doesn't make any sense to be really successful one way and not have a healthy, well-balanced life overall. And so this sense of self-worth is another issue. The last bit of counsel I would give dealing with this issue is don't take counsel from your fears. Don't take counsel from your fears. Okay? There is no truth in fear. There is no truth in fear. There's nothing that fear can tell you that reason and your education can't tell you. Okay? There's nothing that there's no advice fear can give you that you can't get from a good sense of logic, thinking it through, sound reason, education, talking to other people, whatever. Okay? So you don't have to take counsel from your fears. Matter of fact, it should be a red flag that something else is going on. Okay? The end of the story that I started telling here is that, of course, the business went under. Okay? If you don't manage the books, you don't. Matter of fact, the counsel was made, hey, the product that we're selling the most of, we're not even sure that we're making money on every single unit sold. Matter of fact, we have some hints that perhaps we're losing money on the product we sell the most, going out the door, perhaps we're losing money on every single one sold. Interestingly enough, the owner got angry, which is another sign that we could be dealing here. The owner got angry, no, that can't be the problem. We are not going to go that direction, get into those books and evaluate whether they're making money or not. The business went under. There was a divorce, not pleasant. There was loss of homes because they were tied up in the business. So people lost homes. And currently, the principal is under, even though bankruptcy took place, with tax obligations that were ignored and accrued, some of it was forgiven, but the part that wasn't forgiven is so deep that he will never be able to pay it off the rest of his life. Now, once again, I tell that's an unusual story to illustrate the point, but in fact, that's where that particular story ended up. So, be sensitive to the voices in your head. And if you need help, you have great people to give you advice and counselors and so on. And you can get solutions to some of these problems, okay? Thank you. I understand we need a question and answer period now. I'm happy to answer questions about what we talked about today or about advertising, particularly advertising in general. If there are any questions about that. Yes?
Sorry, you talked a lot about modeling fear control, your decision making and moving forward. How would, can I ask personally, would you overpass that fear on a project or anything?
First of all, I don't want to give the impression that I have now reached some state of which I no longer experience fear, because that's just not true. But I realized that fear cannot be what makes me change my direction, okay? So just like that door I said, hey, for some reason I felt I shouldn't go through this door, okay? Maybe there's something going on there. And I sensed that that was the fear talking. What I do is I go through the door. I don't know a better way to explain it.
You say that if, that you know how to bring people into a storefront that is not, I mean, where they're excluded from all the other storefronts. I'm referring to an old experience. 20 years ago, we had a pizza restaurant. Great experience, great exposure on the freeway. But once they got off the freeway, they passed about 5 or 6 different fast food restaurants, including another pizza restaurant that were all on the main road, and we were back in the back. And we blamed a lot of our failure in the business because of location.
Well, location, and don't get me wrong, location can make a huge, huge difference, and you all know that. I mean, that's, but it probably has more effect than what the textbook says. So, I mean, it can be, you don't have to be very far off the main drive or whatever for it to have a huge impact. So, if I were consulting you, the first thing that would make a difference is, do you have great pizza? Is it worth, and okay, she does, just so that everybody heard her answer. So the first, but whether we're talking pizza or anything else, the first answer would have to be that you had pizza that it's worth driving past the others. If it was an apples to apples scenario, then there's probably not much I can do. But if you have great pizza, and these other businesses I talked about, they have great product. And so what we're able to do is highlight that on an ad and illustrate that this pizza is worth, and then we provided maps and so on. This is how you get there. And then make it worth their effort to come and try it. So if you come and try us out, you're going to get a great deal, and you should, because it's worth the effort. And then once we get them there and trying it, that's why it has to be good. Once I get them there, and once they try it, then they'll say, hey, it's hard to get to, but boy, is it worth it. And then they can come back. The other thing you have to default to is probably advertising on an ongoing basis. And we could talk about that. But it's probably advertise again and again and again and again to get them there.
When you're consulting a client and you can tell that they're afraid, how do you go about making them recognize that they're afraid without saying, hey, don't be scared, don't let your fear get in the way. How do you make them recognize that they are afraid?
I don't know that I ever have. I know what you're talking about, because when I sit across from somebody, one of the things I'm really sensitive to is you can see fear in their eyes. So buyers are just afraid of sellers a lot of times. And so you can see fear in their eyes. And if I see fear in their eyes, then I know this isn't going anywhere until we calm down. And so I'll do as much as I can to relax, to be relaxed, and and slow my speech down, which I've not done a very good job of today, but slow the speech down. Try and have, whatever casual conversation, but you've got to get rid of it. I'm not going to say, what's your name? Mike. I'm not going to say, Mike, you look really afraid today. Is there anything I can do? I can't take that approach, but I can, with my body language, my rate of speech, what I talk about, try and calm things down, and maybe say, set it up, and actually the sale is going to take place a time or two again. It may not take place right then. Because if they're having fear, that means there's also no trust, and we just can't go forward until we have a relationship.
I was just like on that comment. I was actually thinking of a movie. It's from forever ago. I can't remember what it was called. But I think it was Tommy Boy. I can't remember. But he's going and selling, brakes, and they could not sell to anybody. The reason they couldn't is because he would get fear. He had fear of failure the whole time. He didn't want to fail his dad who had died. He didn't want to fail himself or the person who's with him. And once he threw that all away and was confident about what he knew he was selling, everybody else was confident in him.
Yes.
They bought from him.
Yeah. So I think it's huge, and I think that's dead on.
I think, like what you're just expressing about overcome the fears and how you become more successful to the point where all the matches to become a very successful entrepreneur. I think in the marketing, like we're selling no matter we're selling services or product to our clients, actually we're selling ourselves.
Yes.
Which means we sell our concept to them, which they can accept it or not. But what you're talking about, the fears, so everybody have a different fears.
Yes.
How they approach to you, they can see the fear will be going away by the way you're selling the product to them or services.
I think if fear is a huge issue for you, I mean, some is just a matter of practicing. Maybe it's Mike, right? Maybe Mike and I work together, and I give my presentation, I come for it, and that can resolve fears, okay? So practicing or giving it again. But if the fears don't subside, if they don't go away, then there's, by practice or by more education or whatever, if what we're dealing with is something a little deeper, and fear of failure falls into that category, then my recommendation is one way or another you get help, because it's not necessarily going away. And it will lead to you not accomplishing your goals. You can have the most brilliant marketing plan in the world. Okay, you can have great product. That's why I'm not talking today about techniques of advertising, because it doesn't make any difference. Okay, if you're not able to sell it, or you don't have confidence in yourself or what you're pushing, no matter how good it is, it's just not going to launch. If the fear keeps us from doing those things, overcoming the obstacles that we have, we're all going to have them. Those obstacles become just pathways to getting where we're going, or they can become doors that just seem to slam close, and this is a good time. I can't handle the pressure. It's a good time to quit. I'm out. So that's my concern.
With your personal selling experience, is it better or easier to do it face-to-face? Because you can cover more ground by calling, but they can easily hang up.
I like the face-to-face because so much of what we communicate is right here, right there. And so if I'm selling to her, I can say, hey, we're connecting, we're not connecting. She can see that I care about her. She can see that I'm a real person. I care, I'm interested in, I have eye contact. I can communicate that honesty. I can communicate some confidence. I can answer a question. I can see that she's too busy. I can make an appointment to come back. So for me, and it has somewhat product specific, but for me, face-to-face works much better. Even though you can make a lot more calls in a shorter amount of time, for me, face-to-face, the ratio of success goes way up. So, but that's just me.
I have one follow-up question.
Yeah.
As far as face-to-face or door-to-door trends are, do you think that profession will maintain the same or go away or increase? Because everyone does have a no soliciting side now, but like you said, they might not necessarily mean that.
Well, I don't know how to answer because I think it's so industry specific. For what I do, that works great. But I can see other businesses, other industries that it makes no sense at all, if you will, to go door to door. Some businesses, what you want to do is networking. You start with Mike. You ask Mike who his friends, okay, and you network out, and so then it's by phone, obviously. So I just can't. I think it's just too industry specific.
How do you
Yes.
know what advertising works? Because in our situation, we put in thousands and thousands of dollars into advertising,
Okay.
and it didn't work.
Okay, the nice thing about advertising is you can get measured results, right? So the first thing I would suggest is we come back to what are your competitors doing? Okay, if your competitors, where are they advertising? How are they advertising? What does it look like, feel like? What's the quality of their ads, et cetera, et cetera? And so the first thing I would do, once again, is be a student of your competitors. You've got to know every move they make. As much information as you can get that's legal and ethical, you need to get what your competitors are doing, one of the things they're doing, what are they doing to be successful, then I would just copy them. Okay, if there's 4 of you and they're doing the same things and you come along, you're more or less guaranteed 25%. I mean, theoretically.
They had a franchise where our direct competitor was a franchise, whereas we were not.
Okay.
And so the franchise took care of the advertising for them, and they were a well-known name.
That's perfect. That's even better, right?
Couldn't afford that.
Well, but you have to find a way to compete. You know, if nothing else, it could send you clues. This is how people are advertising. This is how we're making connections. And so the other beauty of marketing is there are many ways to get measured results. You measure the results. You do split tests. There are a lot of ways to do split tests. And you just move forward from one at a time. Looks like maybe one more question, then we're probably out of time, Shauna, or are we out of time now?
No, one more question.
Okay. Yes? And I'm not sure, it's not two sides of the same coin, right? So yes, it could be. It could be afraid to be successful. Okay, thank you.